My hands still shake sometimes, not from fear, but from the echoes of what I saw, what I felt, and what now lives inside me. The apartment was a cage, a gilded prison cell in the heart of a city that pulsed with life I no longer understood. 2 months since the ice, since the screams, since the whispers began to twist my sanity into impossible knots. I jolted awake, a scream dying in my throat, the stale air thick with the phantom scent of ozone and something metallic, something ancient. Finn's face appeared in my mind's eye, that peaceful, horrifying expression as the swirling darkness swallowed him whole, dissolving him into nothingness. The fractured symbols, the ones that danced on the monolith's surface, crawled behind my eyelids when I blinked, rearranging themselves, whispering things I couldn't understand but couldn't forget. 3:17 a.m. The red numbers on the bedside clock mocked me with their cold, mechanical precision. Another night, another nightmare. Same as every night since Alaska, my apartment was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the infrequent sigh of a car passing on the street below. 2 months in this sterile space, and it still didn't feel like home. Just a temporary shelter, a place to hide while I tried to piece together what was left of my shattered mind. The orange prescription bottle sat on my nightstand, a mocking sentinel. Dr. Sharma's voice echoed in my head, soft and solicitous, yet with an edge of steel. Memory suppression therapy, she'd called it. Take the pills and the traumatic elements would fade away, like smoke in a strong wind. I'd still remember Alaska, she promised, but the sharp edges would dull. The horror would become manageable. The truth would become optional. I hadn't touched it, not a single pill. Pushing myself out of bed, I padded to the kitchen without bothering to turn on the lights. My hand trembled as I filled the coffee maker, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage that had become my constant companion. The military had known. Colonel Rostova, Dr. Thorne, they'd known exactly what waited for us beneath that unforgiving ice. They'd known what it did. Through the kitchen window, I could see the black SUV parked across the street, a phantom lurking in the pre-dawn gloom. Different vehicles, same purpose. They'd been watching me since my return, a shadow detail, reporting my every move back to the colonel, making sure I wasn't talking to anyone I shouldn't. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Rostova. She'd been calling daily, her voice always carrying that same calm, almost detached authority that once commanded my respect. Now it only fueled my anger, a bitter, churning fire in my gut. Kaylin, your therapy sessions aren't optional. This is about your recovery. As if what I'd seen was an illness to be cured rather than a truth to be reckoned with. Coffee in hand, I moved to the living room and turned on a single lamp. The walls, which had once been bare, were now a grotesque tapestry of newspaper clippings, printouts from deep web searches, and my own hastily scrawled notes. The official story stared back at me from a dozen headlines, a carefully constructed lie. Tragic accident at Arctic Research Station claims 17 lives. Methane explosion destroys climate research facility. 4 soldiers awarded medals for heroic rescue attempt. I almost laughed, a dry, bitter sound that cracked the silence. We weren't sent to rescue anyone. They had issued us heavy weaponry, enough to fight a small war. We had strict orders about civilian contact, or rather, the lack of it. They put us in immediate quarantine the moment we returned, a medical isolation that felt more like containment. Dr. Thorne had accessed those encrypted files with unnerving ease, like he knew exactly what he was looking for before he even opened the terminal. They knew, maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to send a 5-person combat engineer team instead of a search and rescue operation, and enough to prepare for violence instead of evacuation. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk, the only space in the apartment that felt truly private, truly mine. Inside lay Finn's personal effects. His watch stopped at the exact moment the cave began to collapse, frozen in an impossible eternity. His dog tags, which should have gone to his sister, Ilara, but somehow ended up in my possession. And a sealed envelope, its edges worn soft from my anxious handling. I had delivered his letter to Ilara, as promised, weeks ago. I'd held her while she wept for a brother whose body would never come home, whose existence now felt like a cruel dream. But I couldn't tell her the truth. What could I possibly say? Your brother wasn't killed in an explosion, Ilara. He was absorbed into an ancient, alien monolith that spoke directly to his mind, that reshaped his very being with promises of transcendence. My fingers traced the jagged scar running along my right forearm, a physical reminder of the frantic sprint through the collapsing cave with Elias, my medic, right behind me. Sometimes it ached, especially before rain, a dull throb that pulsed with an unyielding certainty. This wasn't a nightmare, this was real. Elias had taken the pills. The last time I saw him, he was working intelligence analysis, smiling easily, his eyes devoid of the haunted look that had plagued him for weeks after our return. He believed he'd survived a terrorist ambush at a remote research station. He even seemed happy. Sometimes I envied him that manufactured peace. Zara Khan, our comms specialist, she never made it out of the cave system either. I still saw her face in my dreams. The moment sanity left her eyes, that unsettling, blissful void, and something else took its place. I'd been the one to pull the trigger. Another memory the pills would help me process, erase, make optional Gideon, our heavy weapons man. He made it back, but not for long. He'd started raving about crystalline growths in his own brain, about the whispers, about the monolith calling to him from his sleep. Official report said PTSD, extreme psychosis. 3 weeks after our return, he was found dead, a self-inflicted wound. But I knew better. He'd started researching crystalline formations in brain tissue, asking too many questions, becoming too loud, too unmanageable. Then suddenly he was gone. That left me, alone with the truth. The coffee had gone cold in my mug. Another sleepless night gone. Another day of pretending to recover while relentlessly searching for answers. My phone buzzed with a text. Colonel Rostova. A polite, firm reminder of my therapy appointment at 10:00. Dr. Sharma would be expecting me, ready with her gentle voice and probing questions, ready to suggest, once again, that the medication might help. That forgetting was healing. I set the phone down without responding. The memories were agonizing. Finn's face as the monolith pulled him in. The researchers' screams, echoing through metal corridors as they clawed at their own flesh. Those alien symbols that seemed to change every time you looked directly at them, rewriting reality. But these memories, as painful as they were all I had left of Finn. All I had left of the truth about what lurked beneath Alaska's ice. I wouldn't let them take that from me. Not with therapy, not with pills, not with their carefully constructed lies. The truth was all I had left, and I intended to keep it. The morning sun, a pale, indifferent disk, began to peer through my blinds. My apartment walls, once bare, were covered in evidence. Not the sanitized version they wanted me to believe, but the actual, horrifying sequence of events that had led us to that cave. I closed my eyes and let myself sink once more into memory 3 months ago. Fort Bragg. The air thrummed with a nervous energy that hinted at something more than a routine deployment. I arrived at the briefing room, my gear bag heavy with the unspoken weight of potential conflict. Finn slid into the seat beside me, flipping a pen between his fingers with that habitual nervous energy. $5 says it's another training exercise disguised as an emergency, he whispered, his eyes sparkling with a mix of fatigue and anticipation. I shook my head, already feeling the pre-mission jitters. Colonel Rostova wouldn't pull us off leave for a drill, not for a training op. Finn just shrugged, but I saw the faint worry lines around his eyes. He felt it too. The room quieted as Colonel Eva Rostova entered, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was all sharp angles and cold efficiency, her short, silver hair pulled back tightly from a face that rarely betrayed emotion. Behind her, Dr. Eris Thorne, a lean, academic type with restless eyes, carried a tablet like it held the secrets of the universe. Gentleman, Specialist Khan, Sergeant Volkov, Rostova said, her voice crisp, devoid of inflection. This is Dr. Thorne. He'll be providing the mission parameters. Dr. Thorne stepped forward, the tablet screen projecting satellite images onto the large wall screen behind him. It was a remote facility, stark and isolated, nestled amidst a sea of white. At 0600 yesterday morning, we lost contact with a climate research facility in northern Alaska, he began, his voice surprisingly soft for a man of his stature. 47 personnel, including 17 security contractors. No communication since the blackout, no response to hails. Zara Khan, our comms specialist, leaned forward, her brow furrowed. Weather-related communications failure, sir. Weather looked clear in the last satellite pass. Thorne's gaze flickered to her, a hint of something unreadable in his eyes. Weather was clear when contact was lost, specialist. The facility has redundant systems specifically designed for Arctic conditions. Rostova took over, her gaze sweeping over our faces. Your mission is simple, extraction. Get in, secure any survivors, retrieve essential research materials, and get out. Sir, with respect, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "This sounds like a search and rescue operation. Why us? Why an engineer team?" The colonel's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened, a subtle tightening around the pupils. "Because those are your orders, Sergeant Vance. You are combat engineers. You are equipped for any contingency." The unsaid hung heavy in the air, even those you can't imagine. We moved to equipment allocation. The loadout wasn't standard for extraction. Heavy weaponry, tactical gear. Enough firepower to wage a small war, not evacuate a research station. Finn spoke up, his voice low. "Sir, if this is a climate research station, why the heavy firepower? What kind of contingency requires this?" Rostova paused, her eyes like chips of glacial ice. "The facility is remote, wildlife concerns." "What kind of wildlife needs this kind of stopping power?" Elias, our medic, muttered, examining the medkit he'd been issued. It was loaded with unusual sedatives and restraints, not the standard trauma kits. "One more thing," Rostova added, her voice dropping, each word precisely enunciated. "You are not, under any circumstances, to engage with civilians without direct authorization from me or Dr. Thorne. Is that clear?" We all gave crisp, simultaneous affirmations, but the unease in the room was palpable. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong 4 hours later. We were on a C-130 bound for the Alaskan wilderness. The drone of the engines, a monotonous companion. Finn methodically field-stripped his rifle beside me, though we both knew it was already spotless. It was a nervous habit, a way to focus his mind. "You think they're telling us everything, Kalen?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible above the engine roar. I glanced toward the front of the plane where Rostova and Thorne sat in conversation, their heads bent close like conspirators. "Not a chance." Zara joined us, dropping into the seat opposite, her expression grim. "I did a quick search on that facility before Wheels Up. Official records show climate research, ice core samples, atmospheric monitoring, standard stuff." She paused for dramatic effect. "But the funding doesn't match the mission. Way too much money for ice cores." Gideon, our burly heavy weapons specialist, nudged Elias, who was still organizing his unusual medical supplies. "What's with the elephant tranquilizers, Doc?" Elias, whose real name was Dr. Elias Vance, no relation to me, though we'd often joked about sharing a surname, held up a vial. "Not just sedatives, Gideon. These are heavy-duty antipsychotics, enough to knock out a person for days." He looked thoughtful. "Maybe they're having a bad reaction to the midnight sun," Gideon joked, but his eyes were wide with genuine concern. Nobody laughed. Finn reassembled his rifle with practiced movements. "Maybe it's some kind of outbreak, mass hysteria from being cooped up too long." Zara leaned forward, her eyes bright with speculation. "Or bioweapons research gone wrong." "That would explain the hazmat gear," Elias replied, pointing to the sealed containers at the rear of the plane. I kept my voice low, hoping to quell the growing anxiety. "Whatever it is, they're not telling us for a reason. Stay sharp, follow protocol, but keep your eyes open, question everything." The others nodded. We'd been through enough together to understand. Official orders were one thing. Survival sometimes required reading between the lines. We landed during a blizzard, the Hercules touching down on a makeshift ice runway with a bone-jarring thud. The cold was intense as we disembarked, an alien, biting cold that found every gap in our cold-weather gear, stinging exposed skin. 3 miles to the facility," Rostova shouted over the howling wind, her voice barely audible above the icy gale. "Move out." We trudged through knee-deep snow, visibility reduced to a few yards ahead, the world a swirling vortex of white. For almost an hour we pushed forward in near silence, conserving energy, each breath a painful rasp of icy air in our lungs. "There," Zara called out finally, pointing ahead. The research station emerged from the white haze, a dark, squat shape against the relentless blizzard. No lights visible, no movement. Just a silent, dead silhouette against the white. Rostova gestured us forward. "Vance Callahan, take point. Standard entry protocol." Finn and I approached the main entrance, weapons ready, our breaths pluming in the frigid air. The airlock door was unlocked, our first sign that something was very wrong. Security protocols for facilities this remote, this sensitive, were usually stringent, multi-layered. I radioed command, my voice low and controlled. "Command, Vance, we're entering the facility. Door is unsecured. Doctor." Thorne's voice crackled back immediately, surprisingly calm amidst the static. "Proceed with caution, Sergeant Vance. Locate the main server room, retrieve all data." The airlock cycled with a hiss and a clunk, and we stepped into the facility. Emergency lighting, a dim, sickly red glow, cast long, shifting shadows through empty corridors. The temperature inside was barely warmer than outside. The heating systems had failed or been deliberately shut down. "Clear," Finn whispered, checking the first junction, his rifle sweeping the gloom. The rest of the team filed in behind us. Elias flipped on his tactical light, sweeping it down the hallway. The beam fell upon something dark, smeared on the wall. "Blood, blood," he confirmed, touching it with a gloved finger. "Dried, at least 24 hours old." We moved deeper into the facility, following a grim trail of destruction. Overturned furniture, shattered equipment, more blood, some in dark, congealed pools, some in smears that suggested bodies had been dragged away. The first body we found was in the cafeteria. A man in a security uniform sprawled across a table, his throat torn open. Not by a weapon, by fingernails. His own fingernails, judging by the skin and blood beneath them. "Jesus," Gideon whispered, his voice thick with revulsion. 3 more bodies in the kitchen area. One had bashed his head repeatedly against a wall, a sickening impact that left a hollow in the plaster. Another had methodically severed his own arteries with a kitchen knife, a pool of black blood radiating outwards like a macabre sun. The third had simply put a gun in his mouth, a single, devastating shot. The strangest thing wasn't the self-inflicted violence, it was the expressions. Each face looked calm, serene, as if relieved. "Vance," Rostova called from the corridor. "Server room." "Report." I left Finn supervising Gideon and Elias in the kitchen area and joined the colonel. She and Dr. Thorne stood in what appeared to be the main research hub, a circular room lined with monitoring equipment and data terminals. At the central desk sat a man, slumped forward, a pistol still clutched in his right hand. A bullet hole in his right temple, and blood had dried underneath his head, forming a grotesque halo. "Dr. Sergei Laszlo," Thorne said, his voice flat, "lead researcher." Even though his death was violent, Laszlo's face had the same calm, almost beatific expression I'd seen on the others. His left hand rested on a journal, its pages open and stained with blood spatter. Thorne carefully moved the hand and took the journal, his movements precise, while Rostova accessed the main computer. "System still operational," Rostova noted, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Emergency power only. Specialist Khan, check the security feeds." Zara, who had just entered the room, moved to the security station and began reviewing footage. The system had continued recording, even after power to most of the facility had been cut. "Colonel," I called, a growing dread tightening my chest. "You need to see this." The footage showed the chilling deterioration of the facility over approximately 72 hours. It began subtly. Researchers acting strangely, staring into space, abandoning tasks mid-action. Then came the insomnia. Camera timestamps showed the same personnel wandering the corridors at all hours, their eyes wide and vacant. Next, violence erupted. Seemingly random at first, then organized. Researchers attacking security personnel, then each other. The most disturbing sequence showed a middle-aged scientist in a lab coat methodically smashing his head against a wall. No hesitation. No flinching from pain, just mechanical, purposeful self-destruction. When he finally collapsed, his colleagues stepped over his body without reaction, their faces blank. Elias joined us, his face grim. "I've examined 6 bodies so far. The pattern is consistent, 2 types of death. Violent self-harm with no defensive wounds or what appears to be peaceful suicide. Nothing in between. It's like some just fought it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, and others gave in. Elias nodded. "The violent ones, it's like they were trying to stop something in their heads. The peaceful ones, they surrendered to it. Welcomed it, found something," Zara called from across the room. She stood by an auxiliary terminal, its screen displaying a map of the immediate area. "There's a cave system 3 miles north of here. According to these logs, they were conducting regular expeditions there." Thorne closed Laszlo's journal with a snap. "Show me." As Zara pulled up the data, Finn entered the room, his face pale. "We've cleared the residential wing. 11 more bodies, same pattern." He paused, looking at me. "Whatever happened here, it killed everyone." "Not everyone," Gideon called from the corridor, his voice echoing eerily. "The logs show 47 personnel. We've only found 22 bodies so far." A chill settled in my stomach, a cold, hard knot. "So where are the others?" Rostova turned to Thorne, their eyes meeting in a look that confirmed my suspicion. They knew more than they were telling us, far more. Gather your gear, Rostova ordered, her voice cutting through the silence. We're spending the night here. Tomorrow we investigate those caves. I glanced at Finn. His expression matched my growing unease. Whatever had happened in this facility, the true answers lay in those caves. And something told me we wouldn't like what we found. Rostova powered down the security terminal, plunging the room into deeper shadows. The images of researchers destroying themselves, of tranquil smiles amidst pools of their own blood, stayed in my mind. We bunk here tonight, Rostova announced, checking her watch. 0600 departure to investigate those caves. I want full gear and maximum ammunition. Sir, I said, stepping forward, shouldn't we call this in, get a quarantine team out here? This is beyond our mission scope. Rostova fixed me with a cold stare, her eyes unblinking. Communications are for emergency extraction only, Sergeant Vance. Those are standing orders. With respect, Colonel, we've got 22 dead bodies and evidence of some kind of mass psychosis. That qualifies as an emergency. Your concerns are noted, Sergeant. She turned away, effectively ending the conversation. Dr. Thorne and I will be in the facility director's office. The rest of you conduct a thorough sweep of the remaining sections. I want to know everything about this place by morning. Zara caught my eye as the colonel left, giving a slight shake of her head. We both knew something wasn't right, but questioning orders further would only make things worse. Let's split up, I said to the team. Elias, check the medical bay. Zara, communications center. Gideon, equipment storage. Finn and I will take the main laboratory. Finn fell in beside me as we moved down the corridor toward the lab, the dim red lights casting our shadows long and distorted. They knew, he muttered, once we were out of earshot. Rostova and Thorne, they knew what we'd find here. Yeah, I agreed, my grip tightening on my rifle. Question is, what else aren't they telling us? The main laboratory took up almost an entire wing of the facility. Workstations lined the walls, abandoned mid-task. Coffee cups sat half-empty, some with lipstick marks still visible on the rims. One desk had a framed photo of a smiling family knocked over, a casualty of whatever silent panic had swept through this place. Check the computers, I told Finn. I'll look for physical records. Most of the systems were locked down, requiring credentials we didn't have. But on the third terminal I tried, someone had left themselves logged in. Dr. Anna Petrova, according to the user profile. The desktop was cluttered with spreadsheets and data analysis programs. I clicked through several files, finding mostly technical readouts I couldn't understand. Frequency analysis, radiation measurements, seismic activity logs. Then I found a folder labeled Anomaly 7 Recordings. Finn, check this out. He came to stand behind me as I played the first audio file. Static at first, a low hiss, then a pattern emerged. A pulsing tone that seemed to modulate in complex, almost rhythmic ways. Not random noise, but not any kind of communication I recognized either. Sounds like whale song, Finn said, his brow furrowed, but wrong. The second file was similar, but louder, clearer. The third made my skin crawl. The same signal, but now with what sounded like whispers beneath it, too faint to make out distinct words, yet undeniably there. Like a chorus of silent voices, just beyond human perception. When were these recorded? Finn asked, leaning closer. I checked the file data. This one's from 6 weeks ago, the next from 4 weeks ago. The last one just 10 days ago. Getting stronger, Finn murmured, his voice tight. In a locked drawer beneath the main workstation, I found a portable hard drive connected to an encryption device. The setup looked military-grade, not standard research equipment. Dr. Thorne, I called over the radio, my voice tight with discovery. Vance, we found an encrypted data storage device in the main lab. His voice came back immediately, devoid of surprise. Bring it to the director's office. When we arrived, Thorne was already working at the facility director's terminal, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. Rostova stood by the window, watching the blizzard intensify outside, her expression unreadable. The snow was coming down so heavily now that visibility had dropped to near zero. The drive, Thorne said, holding out a hand without looking up. I passed it to him, noting how he produced a key card from his pocket, one that matched the encryption device perfectly. Not a coincidence. You've seen this setup before, I observed, a chill of understanding running down my spine. Focus on your orders, Sergeant Vance, Rostova interjected, her voice sharp. Thorne connected the drive to his tablet, his fingers moving rapidly across the screen, decrypting the data. Laszlo was thorough, he muttered, Everything's here. What exactly is everything? I pressed. Ristova and Thorne exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Finally, Ristova nodded, a subtle permission given. They discovered a signal, Thorne explained, turning his tablet so we could see the screen. Originally detected during routine electromagnetic monitoring, they thought it was a natural phenomenon. Geomagnetic, perhaps, but the pattern was too regular. He pulled up a visualization of the signal. Pulsing waves that formed complex, changing patterns, hypnotic in their alien geometry. This facility wasn't studying climate change, Ristova added, her voice flat. That was the cover story. Their real mission was to investigate this signal and determine its source. Which they found in those caves, Finn finished, his eyes wide. Correct. Thorne pulled up a topographic map of the region. The signal originates approximately 2 miles into the cave system north of here. Its strength has been increasing steadily for months. What kind of signal causes people to kill themselves? I asked, the question sharp, biting. Thorne's expression remained carefully neutral. That's what we're here to determine. I gestured toward the tablet, then to the closed door beyond which lay the dead researchers. Seems like they already figured it out. And it killed them. We have better equipment and prepared personnel, Sergeant, Ristova cut in, her voice cold. And unlike them, we know what we're walking into. When we left the director's office, Finn pulled me into an empty monitoring room, his face pale in the dim emergency light. This is it, Kalen, he said, using my nickname, his voice strained. They're sending us into whatever killed these people, and they knew exactly what was here. Finn ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen countless times during our deployments, a telltale sign of deep anxiety. I've got a bad feeling about tomorrow. Worse than anything we've faced. We'll stay sharp, I assured him, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. Stick together. Yeah, he agreed, but his eyes were distant. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Listen, just in case, can you make sure Alara gets this? I stared at the letter he was holding out. We'd written just in case letters before for high-risk deployments. But this was different. This felt more final. Nothing's going to happen to you, Finn, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my gut. Probably not, he agreed with a forced, unnatural smile. But something just feels wrong about this mission, more wrong than usual. Just take it for my peace of mind. I took the envelope, noting Alara's name written in Finn's neat, careful handwriting. I'll hold on to it, I promised. But you'll be delivering it yourself when we get home, after a long leave. Thanks, Kalen. He squeezed my shoulder, his grip surprisingly tight. I'm going to check our gear. Make sure everything's ready for tomorrow. After Finn left, I found the facility's research library. While most information was stored digitally, Dr. Laszlo, the lead researcher, had kept handwritten journals. Old-school composition notebooks, filled with dense writing and intricate diagrams. The most recent volume lay open on his desk, as if he'd been called away mid-sentence. The early entries were clinical and precise, detailed accounts of the signal's discovery and initial analysis. But as the weeks progressed, the writing grew increasingly erratic, the neat script deteriorating into a jagged scrawl. Day 47. Sleep disturbances reported by 63% of personnel. Vivid dreams, predominantly featuring geometric patterns consistent with the signal modulation. Prescribing mild sedatives, but effect is minimal. Subjects report a sense of profound insight upon waking, quickly lost. Day 58, cognitive effects becoming more pronounced. Researchers reporting moments of clarity or insight, followed by profound confusion. No one can articulate what these insights contain. Chen stared at his computer screen for 3 hours today without typing. When interrupted, he couldn't recall what he'd been thinking. Persistent low-frequency hum reported by multiple subjects, localized to the cranium. Day 62. The signal is changing us. Roberts and Abernathy destroyed their own research yesterday, claiming it was irrelevant compared to what they now understand. When questioned, neither could explain their actions. Both appeared unusually serene afterward. A strange, fractal-like pattern observed on the skin of some personnel, often near the temples or neck, fleeting and difficult to photograph. Day 70. We've been wrong from the beginning. The signal isn't a transmission. It's older than human civilization, not a message, a lure. It speaks directly to the mind, bypasses language, bypasses thought, goes straight to the core of consciousness. It offers coherence, unity. The final entries were disturbing. the pages marred by ink blots and erratic pressure, as if Laszlo had been struggling to control his own hand. It wants in. Not of this earth. Millions of years old, waiting, patient. The others have stopped fighting it. They say it's beautiful when you surrender. They say it's the only true freedom. I've locked myself in the director's office. The gun is my last resort. Do not approach the source. Destroy it if possible. It will consume everything. Consume, transform. I closed the journal, my mouth dry, a bitter taste coating my tongue. Laszlo's final entry was a warning, a desperate plea his superiors had chosen to ignore. And tomorrow, we'd be walking straight into whatever had driven him to put a bullet in his own brain back in the main corridor. I found Elias emerging from the medical bay, his expression grim, his usually precise movements stiff. "Find anything?" I asked, bracing myself. "Nothing good." He led me into the facility's small medical center. On an examination table lay a researcher's corpse, the skull partially dissected. "Look at this." Using forceps, Elias lifted a small, delicate crystalline formation from the exposed brain tissue. It caught the dim red light, refracting it in unnatural, almost living patterns. It pulsed faintly, a blue-green luminescence mirroring the strange fungi we'd seen on the satellite images. "What am I looking at, Elias?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I've found these in every brain I've examined," Elias explained, his voice low with a terrible awe. "They're growing from the cerebral cortex, specifically regions associated with higher cognition and sensory processing. Growing like a cancer. No cancer forms crystalline structures, Kalen," Elias said, shaking his head. "I've never seen anything like this in medical literature. The formations are organized, almost architectural. And they appear to have developed rapidly, weeks, not months or years. Could they be responsible for the behavior we saw in the footage?" Elias carefully returned the crystal to its container. "I'd stake my career on it. Something was literally rewiring their brains." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold, the signal. "That would be my guess," I said. "Some kind of resonance effect, perhaps. Tuning their brains to its frequency." Elias closed his case with a soft click. "Whatever it is, it's not natural, and I doubt it's friendly." I found Zara in the communication center, staring blankly at a wall. Her fingers tapped a rhythm against her leg, irregular but somehow deliberate, like Morse code without meaning or a fragmented melody. "Zara, you good?" She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on a point in space, lips moving slightly, as if silently conversing with someone only she could see. "Zara," I said louder, touching her shoulder. She startled, blinking rapidly, her eyes refocusing on me as if returning from a great distance. "Sergeant Vance." "Sorry, I was just thinking about what Her brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "I don't remember, just tired, I guess. When's the last time you slept? Last night or," she shook her head, "it doesn't matter. The comms are all down. No satellite, no radio. Storm interference, probably." I studied her carefully. The dark circles under her eyes could be attributed to our long day, but the vacant stare reminded me uncomfortably of the researchers in the security footage. "Try to get some rest," I told her, my voice gentle. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah, rest." She nodded, but made no move to leave the terminal. I found Gideon in the equipment storage, methodically checking our gear, always the most practical member of our team. He'd organized everything we'd need for tomorrow's expedition with military precision. "How's it looking, Gideon?" I asked. "We're good on ammo and basic supplies," he reported, his voice low, his movements efficient. "Found some additional cold weather gear that'll help in the caves. Temperature readings from the research team show it gets warmer the deeper you go, which makes no sense given the depth and location." "Nothing about this place makes sense," I muttered. Gideon nodded grimly. I checked the seismic equipment logs. They recorded minor tremors from the cave direction every time the signal amplitude increased. "Whatever's in there, Kalen, it's not just broadcasting, it's active. It's alive." The blizzard howled outside as we finished our preparations, a relentless, furious beast. The wind threw snow against the windows with such force it sounded like someone throwing handfuls of sand. No one was coming for us, and no one was getting out until the storm passed. We gathered for a final briefing in the cafeteria, carefully avoiding the dried bloodstains on the floor, an invisible line marking the horrors of the previous day. Rostova outlined the mission plan. Enter the caves at dawn, locate the signal source, document everything, determine if it poses a continued threat. What happens when we find the source? Finn asked, his voice steady, but his eyes darted between Rostova and Thorn. We assess and report, Rostova said, her gaze unwavering. Dr. Thorn has specialized equipment to record and analyze the signal safely. And if it affects us like it affected the researchers, I pressed. Thorn adjusted his glasses, his face unreadable. The exposure duration would need to be much longer to create similar effects. We'll be in and out in under 6 hours. His confidence didn't match the caution in Laszlo's journal. Either he knew something Laszlo didn't, or he was lying to us. My gut screamed the latter. We dispersed to get what sleep we could before dawn. I claimed a small dormitory room, stripping off my tactical vest but keeping my sidearm closed, its cold weight a familiar comfort. Through the thin walls, I could hear the others settling in. Gideon's quiet murmuring as he ran through his mental checklists. Ilya's organizing his medical supplies. Zara's restless pacing, a rhythmic tapping that filled the silence. Sleep came in fragments, broken by the storm's assault on the building. Each time I drifted off, I found myself back in that security footage, watching the researchers destroy themselves with peaceful smiles, their eyes wide and serene. In my dreams, their faces morphed into Finn's, then Zara's, then Gideon's, and finally, my own. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, I woke to what sounded like whispers. Not the wind, not the building groaning under the blizzard's weight, but actual voices, just at the edge of hearing, speaking words I couldn't quite grasp. I sat up, pistol in hand, listening intently. The voices continued, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Not English, not any language I recognized, yet somehow they carried meaning, a profound, unsettling comprehension that hovered just beyond my grasp. In the corridor, a floorboard creaked. I opened my door to find Finn standing there, looking as unsettled as I felt. His eyes were wide, shadowed. "You hear them too," he whispered, his voice thin. I nodded. "Anyone else?" "Zara's still pacing," he said. "Checked on her earlier. Gideon's snoring like a bear." We moved silently through the facility, following the whispers that seemed to retreat as we approached, always just out of reach. The emergency lighting cast red shadows that played tricks on my eyes, creating movement where there was none. In the main laboratory, we found Zara sitting at one of the terminals, headphones on, her face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. Her fingers continued their irregular tapping. "Zara, you okay?" I asked. She jumped slightly, pulling off the headphones, her eyes wide, a flicker of fear in them before it vanished, replaced by that blank serenity. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd see if I could learn anything more about what we're walking into tomorrow. Find anything. Nothing good," she rubbed her eyes, a gesture that seemed almost normal. "They sent 3 expeditions into those caves. The first 2 came back, the third didn't, and they kept sending people." Finn asked, incredulously. "That's the thing." Zara turned the screen toward us. "The second expedition returned different, more focused. They're the ones who pushed hardest for the third expedition." On the screen was a video interview with a female researcher, recorded after her return from the second cave exploration. Her eyes were bright, intense, almost feverish. Her speech patterns were oddly rhythmic, almost hypnotic. "It's beautiful down there," she said in the recording, her voice soft, melodic. "You can't understand until you see it. Everything makes sense when you're close to it. All the answers, all the suffering, it just fades away." The whispers seemed to grow louder as we watched, a subtle chorus just beyond understanding. Not coming from the facility at all, I realized with growing unease. Coming from the north, from the caves, the signal had found us. And tomorrow, we would be walking straight to its source. Dawn broke across the Arctic landscape with a false beauty, the snow showing impossibly delicate shades of pink and gold. The blizzard had stopped during the night, leaving behind a fresh, pristine blanket of snow that sparkled under the rising sun. I stood outside the research facility, adjusting my pack and watching my breath cloud in the frigid air. The beauty before me felt like a cruel joke, a veil cast over the horrors we'd discovered. The whispers had receded with daylight, but they still lingered in my mind, a phantom hum, a promise of something vast and terrible. I hadn't mentioned them to Rostova or Thorn. Some instinct told me to keep that experience, that shared auditory hallucination, between those of us who'd heard them. "Ready to move out, Sergeant Vance," Gideon reported, approaching with his gear meticulously arranged, a silent mountain of preparedness. I nodded, scanning our assembled team. Ilya's was checking his medical supplies one last time, his brow furrowed in thought. Zara stood slightly apart, staring northward toward our destination with an unsettling intensity, her fingers still tapping that silent rhythm against her thigh. Finn caught my eye and gave a small nod. He was good to go, but the tension in his shoulders told me he was as uneasy, as profoundly disturbed as I was. Colonel Ristover emerged from the facility with Dr. Thorne. She carried a reinforced case that hadn't been part of our original equipment, something sleek and black, humming with unseen power. 5 miles north, Ristover announced, consulting a handheld GPS device. We maintain radio contact throughout. Any sign of disorientation or unusual thoughts, you report immediately. What exactly are we looking for, sir? I asked, my voice cutting through the crisp air. Thorne adjusted his glasses, his gaze piercing. You'll know it when you see it, Sergeant. We moved out in standard formation, trudging through snow that sometimes reached up to our mid-thigh. Even though we had specialized cold weather gear, the extreme cold cut through our layers, finding every seam, and the weight of our equipment made each step a difficult, exhausting effort. Zara strangely took point, breaking trail with unexpected energy, her movements almost fluid. She seemed off to you, Finn muttered, falling in beside me. I watched Zara forge ahead, her pace relentless. Hasn't been right since last night, the whispers. I glanced back to make sure Rostova wasn't within earshot. But yeah, I think so. 2 hours into our trek, the terrain changed. The flat, featureless plain gradually sloped upward as we approached a low mountain range, jagged teeth against the horizon. The cave entrance was a gaping, jagged hole in the base of the tallest peak, a black mar against the blinding white. This is it, Thorne confirmed, checking coordinates on his device. The signal originates approximately 2 miles inside. We paused to adjust our gear at the entrance. The biting wind funneled into the cavern, a mournful howl. The dark cave stretched before us, an inky void. I switched on my tactical light, the beam barely penetrating the gloom ahead, swallowed by the immense darkness. Standard cave exploration protocol, Rostova ordered. Vance Callahan on point, Khan and Volkov covering our flanks. Elias, stay with Dr. Thorne. I'll take rear security. I stepped into the cave and immediately noticed an unsettling change in the air. The bitter cold of the Arctic gave way to a strange, tepid dampness, like a breath drawn from deep within the earth. Temperatures rising, Elias noted, checking a thermometer on his pack. Already 10 degrees warmer than outside. That's not normal, Gideon said, running a gloved hand along the slick, rough-hewn wall. Cave systems this far north should maintain near-surface temperatures, if not colder. The research team documented the same anomaly, Thorne replied, his voice calm, almost detached. The deeper sections reach almost 50 degrees Fahrenheit. We proceeded cautiously, our tactical lights sweeping the rough tunnel ahead. The passage sloped gently downward, widening as we advanced, the echoes of our footsteps swallowed by the vastness. After about half a mile, a strange, ethereal blue-green light began to supplement our flashlights, emanating from the cave walls themselves. Bioluminescent fungi, Elias explained, examining patches of glowing growth that spread across the uneven surfaces. I've never seen this species before. It's vibrant. The organisms pulsed with a soft, hypnotic light, creating an eerie, underwater effect that made depth perception difficult, distorting shadows into phantom movements. I checked my radio. Command Vance, check all stations. Nothing but static answered, a high-pitched whine mixed with the hiss of white noise. Comms are down, I reported to Rostova. She didn't seem surprised. Expected. The research team documented communication failures beyond this point. We proceed as planned. The path continued downward, sometimes steeply enough to require careful footing, the ground uneven and slick. The temperature increased steadily, causing moisture to condense on our cold equipment, beating on our rifle barrels. Strange formations jutted from the ceiling and floor. Not stalagmites and stalactites, but crystalline structures that caught and refracted the bioluminescent light, shimmering with an unearthly glow. The whispers, which had been faint outside, began to grow stronger, a faint, insistent murmur at the edge of my perception. Just out of focus, Finn stopped abruptly, raising his fist, his body tensing. I froze, scanning ahead, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. Movement, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rising hum in the air. I strained my eyes, peering into the blue-green twilight. At first, I saw nothing. Then a shape moved against the cave wall, distinctly human. Identify yourself, I called out, weapon raised, my voice echoing unnaturally in the vast space. A figure emerged from behind a towering crystalline formation, hands raised. A man in a tattered research uniform, his beard overgrown, his eyes wide with apparent relief, though something about their intensity was unsettling. "American military," he called, his voice cracking, a raw sound of desperate hope. "Thank God, we thought everyone had forgotten about us." 4 more figures appeared behind him, emerging from the shadows, all wearing the facility's uniforms, all showing signs of weeks underground. Dirty clothes, unkempt hair, hollow cheeks, but their movements were too smooth, too coordinated. "Survivors from the research team," I said to Rostova over my shoulder, not lowering my weapon. Something felt wrong. Their postures were too rigid, their expressions too fixed, too serene. "We've been hiding," the first man explained, taking a step forward, his voice gaining a strange, melodic quality. "After the others turned, the signal got to them. But we resisted. We've been waiting for rescue." Ilias moved up beside me, his medic's instincts overriding his caution. "I'm a medic. Is anyone injured? Do you need aid?" The survivors exchanged glances that lasted a beat too long, a silent, knowing communication that raised the hairs on my neck. "Gideon, Zara, secure our flanks," I ordered quietly, my voice low and firm. The lead researcher took another step forward. In the changing fungal light, I caught a glimpse of something beneath his collar, something dark and branching, climbing up his neck like roots, like a living tattoo. "We're so glad you're here," he said, his smile widening unnaturally, too wide, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "We can show you what we found. It's beautiful. It changes everything." Finn tensed beside me. "Kalen," the researcher lunged forward with impossible speed, crossing 10 feet in a heartbeat. I fired instinctively, a double tap, catching him in the shoulder. He didn't flinch. Didn't even seem to notice as he crashed into me, a solid, unyielding weight. "Contact," I shouted as we went down, my rifle clattering against the rock floor. The cave erupted in chaos. The other researchers attacked with coordinated precision, moving faster than any human should. One woman, her eyes glowing with that blue-green light, tackled Gideon, her mouth open in a silent scream. 2 others charged Rostova and Thorn. My attacker's hands closed around my throat with crushing strength. This close, I could see his eyes. Pupils blown so wide they nearly swallowed the iris, unfocused, yet somehow seeing beyond me into something vast. His mouth moved, forming words in no language I recognized, words that resonated directly in my mind, a silent, deafening torrent of alien thought. I drove my combat knife into his side, twisting the blade, feeling the crunch of bone. No reaction, no pain. His grip only tightened, squeezing the life from me. Black spots danced in my vision as my oxygen dwindled, the whispers in my head turning into a deafening roar. A gunshot cracked through the cave, sharp and decisive, and my attacker's head snapped back, a neat hole appearing between his eyes. His grip loosened as he collapsed, the blue-green light in his eyes dimming. I rolled away, gasping for air, clutching my throat. Finn stood over me, pistol still trained on the now-still body, his face grim. "You okay, Kalen?" I nodded, scrambling to my feet as gunfire echoed through the cave. Gideon was firing controlled bursts into a female researcher, who continued advancing despite taking multiple hits to the center mass, her serene smile unwavering. "Headshots only," I called out, seeing that body shots were useless. Gideon adjusted his aim, a single, precise shot. The woman dropped instantly, her expression still fixed in that unnatural, blissful smile. The skirmish ended as quickly as it had begun. 5 researchers lay dead on the cave floor, their serenity a macabre counterpoint to the violence. Gideon stood over one, breathing heavily, blood spattered across his face from the brief, brutal struggle. Ilias was checking Zara, who had sustained a deep gash across her forearm from one of the attackers. "Everyone report," I ordered, moving to check on the rest of the team. "Superficial injuries only," Ilias replied, applying a pressure bandage to Zara's arm, his own hands shaking. But that woman, her strength was impossible. She nearly crushed Zara's windpipe before I got her free. Rostova approached one of the bodies, nudging it with her boot to ensure it was neutralized. Her face was impassive. "Thorn, anything you'd like to share about what we just encountered?" Dr. Thorn remained oddly composed despite the blood on his normally immaculate clothes, a small splash across his cheek. He held his tablet, its screen glowing with complex data. "The signal affects neural pathways," he stated, his voice clinical. "We knew extended exposure would result in significant behavioral changes." "Behavioral changes," I gestured to the bodies, the blood still oozing from their wounds. They took multiple gunshots without flinching. That's not behavior, that's physically impossible. Elias, I called, check the bodies, tell me what we're dealing with. Elias knelt beside the nearest researcher, the man who had attacked me. He examined the body methodically, focusing on the strange, dark patterns I'd glimpsed on his neck. Using a scalpel, he made a small incision at the base of the skull, carefully peeling back the skin. "Mother of God," he whispered. We gathered around as Elias carefully exposed what lay beneath the skin. A crystalline formation, not a growth on the spinal column, but fused to it, branching upward into the brainstem, spreading like an invasive vine. The crystal pulsed with the same blue-green light as the fungi on the walls, a soft, rhythmic glow. "It's growing directly into the cerebellum," Elias explained, his medical training overcoming his evident horror. "These filaments, they're integrated with the nervous system, overriding pain responses, potentially enhancing muscle performance by bypassing normal limitations." "They're not human anymore," Gideon said quietly, his voice hollow. "Not fully," Elias agreed, his face pale. "This growth, it's rewriting their basic functions, and look at this." He pointed to patterns in the crystal, subtle fractures and shimmering lines. These structures match the signal frequency patterns Dr. Petrova documented. It's like their brains are becoming resonators for the signal. Zara hadn't moved from where she stood, staring at one of the dead researchers. "They wanted to bring us to it," she said distantly, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "They weren't attacking, they were collecting." I exchanged glances with Finn. Zara's affect was flattening, her eyes showing the same distant quality we'd seen in the research footage. "Zara, you good?" I asked sharply, trying to break through the fog. She blinked, seeming to return to herself, a fleeting spark of her old self in her eyes. "Yeah, fine. Just processing. We should turn back," I said to Rostova, my voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "Whatever's down there changed these people. We're not equipped for this. This is not a mission. It's a suicide run." "The mission continues, Sergeant Vance," Rostova replied without hesitation, her eyes fixed on the entrance to the deeper cave. "We need to locate the source. With all due respect, sir, we've got unnatural crystal growths hijacking human nervous systems. This is beyond our parameters. This is beyond anything. This is a containment breach on an unprecedented scale." "Your objection is noted, Sergeant Vance," Rostova said coldly, her face a mask of iron determination. "Now follow your orders." Thorne, meanwhile, had been scanning the bodies with a device from his special case, a quiet, almost reverent hum emanating from it. "The signal is stronger now," he murmured, more to himself than to us. "We're getting close." We had no choice but to continue deeper. I took point again with Finn, both of us on high alert after the encounter, our senses strained, our nerves frayed. The tunnel narrowed briefly before opening into a vast chamber that stole my breath. The ceiling soared at least 100 feet above us, completely covered in the bioluminescent fungi that cast the entire cavern in that ghostly blue-green light. Crystal formations, larger than a man, jutted from the floor and walls, pulsing in rhythm with a sound that was more felt than heard. A deep, subsonic pressure against my eardrums, vibrating through my bones, making my teeth ache. And at the center, dominating the impossible space, stood the monolith dot. It was 20 feet tall, perfectly vertical, and composed of a material so profoundly black it seemed to absorb both our flashlight beams and the ambient bioluminescence around it. It was not just dark, it was an absence of light, a tear in reality. The surface moved slightly, oddly, maintaining its impossible shape, like oil swirling on water. Across its surface, symbols moved, complex geometric patterns that rearranged themselves whenever I tried to look at them directly, eluding my comprehension. Looking at them hurt my head, a sharp, piercing pain behind my eyes. "We found it," Thorne whispered, his professional detachment briefly cracking to reveal something like reverence, like ecstasy. The pressure in my skull increased as we approached, the air vibrating with an energy that made my teeth ache, made my skin prickle. Each step closer felt like pushing against an invisible current, a growing resistance that was also a strange, seductive pull. Zara suddenly dropped to her knees, hands pressed against her temples, her body convulsing slightly. "I can hear it," she gasped, her voice raw, distorted by the overwhelming presence. "It's so clear now." Elias moved to help her, but Zara shoved him away with unexpected force, sending him sprawling. "Don't touch me," Zara screamed, scrambling backward on her hands and knees. I understand now, I understand everything. She staggered to her feet, her eyes wild, her rifle swinging between us. It's not hostile, it's beautiful. It's been here for millions of years, waiting for minds evolved enough to comprehend it. Zara, put the weapon down, I ordered, keeping my voice steady despite the growing pressure in my head, the insistent thrumming behind my eyeballs. You can't stop this, Zara laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that chilled my blood more than the Arctic had. We're so small, Kaelin, so temporary, but it offers permanence. Transcendence. She fired suddenly, the shot going wide past Gideon's head, impacting harmlessly against a crystal formation. Finn and I both raised our weapons, but Zara was moving erratically, firing wildly around the chamber, a manic dance of destruction. I understand now, it's beautiful, she shouted, bullets ricocheting off crystal formations, sending glittering shards flying. I lined up my shot as Zara turned toward Finn, weapon raised, her face alight with that terrifying, blissful smile. One clean round to the head. Zara dropped instantly, her face frozen in an expression of ecstatic revelation, her eyes wide open, staring at the monolith. Silence fell across the chamber, broken only by the faint, rhythmic pulse emanating from the monolith, a silent heartbeat of the universe. It's getting to all of us, Elias said quietly, his face ashen. The longer we stay, the more it affects our cognition. As if in answer, a burst of static came through our radios, followed by Colonel Rostova's voice, cutting through the interference, sharp and clear. Destroy structure, priority, destroy, repeat, destroy structure, priority, extraction in 12 hours, rendezvous point Alpha, destroy. The transmission cut off as abruptly as it began, but the order was clear enough. We need to place charges, I said, unslung my pack, my hands moving on instinct. Elias, Gideon, secure the perimeter. Finn, help me with the explosives. I began removing blocks of C4 from my pack, fighting against the pressure in my skull that grew with each passing moment, each beat of the monolith's impossible pulse. The monolith seemed to pulse more intensely now, the symbols moving faster across its surface, a dizzying, kaleidoscopic dance. And beneath the visible manifestations, something reached into my mind. Not the whispers from before, but impressions. Concepts too vast to be contained in language. Knowledge beyond human comprehension. Unity across time and space. Transcendence from the limitations of individual consciousness. It showed me endless stars, the slow dance of galaxies, the birth and death of suns. It offered understanding. It offered peace. I forced myself to focus on the explosives, on the cold, hard reality of the C4. Placing the first charge at the base of the monolith, I felt a strange warmth emanating from its impossible black surface. It moved as I approached, a subtle rippling, as if responding to my presence, acknowledging my destructive intent. Each block of C4 required immense concentration to position properly, my hands shaking with the effort of resisting the monolith's silent call, its seductive invitation. Finn worked beside me, his movements growing increasingly distracted. He paused frequently, staring at the shifting patterns on the monolith with an expression of dawning comprehension, his eyes losing focus. Finn, I said sharply, my voice sounding distant even to myself. Stay with me, focus on the charges. He blinked, turning to me with effort, as if struggling to return from a great distance. Sorry. It's like deja vu, Kaelin, but for things I've never seen before. Do you feel it? Do you? Don't listen to it, I warned, setting another charge, forcing myself to push through the rising haze in my own mind. Focus on the job. Gideon approached from the perimeter, his movements mechanical, his gaze fixed on something unseen. The cave system continues beyond this chamber, he reported, his voice flat. There could be more survivors. We stick together, Gideon, I ordered, my voice firm despite the growing disorientation. No one goes anywhere alone. Elias knelt beside Zara's body, examining the crystalline growth already forming at the base of her skull, spreading outwards like black ice. It's accelerating, he reported grimly, his face pale. These formations developed in minutes, not days. The others took hours, days. She absorbed it almost instantly. Thorne was recording everything with his specialized equipment, his face illuminated by the screens, a faint, almost mad gleam in his eyes. The energy readings are off the scale, he muttered, his voice a reverent whisper. This material, it shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. It's a prime mover. I set the final explosive charge, my mind screaming with the effort of resistance as Finn stood watching the monolith, staring upward at its impossible surface. The pressure in my skull had become a persistent agony, a drumbeat of alien thought, but I forced myself to complete the task. Once the charges were set, we could retreat to a safe distance and end this. End it. End the whispers. End the beautiful madness. The symbols on the monolith moved faster, almost frantic now. The subsonic pulse quickened, matching the racing of my heart. Something was building, a response to our actions. A last, desperate effort to communicate before we destroyed it. A final invitation. I stepped back, detonator in hand, fighting the call that promised answers to questions I hadn't even thought to ask, that promised an end to all suffering. Charges set, I announced, my voice hoarse. We moved back to the entrance chamber and detonate. Finn hadn't moved from his position before the monolith, his hand raised slowly toward its surface, fingers outstretched as if reaching for something only he could see, something profound and unseen. "Finn," I called, fear gripping my chest, cold and sharp. "We're leaving now." He didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. The monolith's surface moved toward his outstretched hand, like a dark, viscous liquid reaching back. "Finn," I shouted louder this time, my voice raw. The air around us vibrated with the monolith's pulsing energy, making my voice sound distant, even to my own ears. Finn's hand hovered inches from the black surface, fingers spread out like he was feeling heat from a flame. The black material moved in response, stretching toward him as though drawn to him, a sentient darkness. I dropped the detonator and lunged forward, grasping his shoulder with both hands, pulling with all my strength. "We need to go, Finn, now." "Kalen," he whispered, using my childhood nickname without turning away from the monolith. His voice had become softer, gentler, almost reverent, filled with an impossible peace. "It's not evil. It's just different. It's been waiting so long." I tightened my grip and pulled harder, trying to physically drag him back, to wrestle him from the insidious influence. "Whatever you're hearing, it's not real. It's affecting your mind just like the others." Finn shrugged me off with a strength I'd never felt from him before, sending me stumbling backward, my balance lost in the overwhelming pressure. In the blue-green light, his face looked peaceful, luminous, and identical to the expression I'd seen on the researchers who had killed themselves. "Don't you feel it, Kalen?" He spread his arms wide, a gesture of profound acceptance. "It's offering us everything, all knowledge, all experience. We won't die, we'll transform." Behind us, Gideon called out, his voice tight with urgency. "Vance, we need to move." I glanced back to see Elias and Gideon retreating toward the cave entrance, Elias clutching the detonator I'd dropped, his face a mask of grim determination. Thorn was backing away too, his equipment hastily packed, his eyes fixed on the monolith with a disturbing mix of terror and fascination. The colonel stood slightly apart, her eyes scanning everything with cold, clinical calculation, making no move to help. "Finn, your sister is waiting for you," I pleaded, stepping toward him again, my voice cracking. "Remember, Alara, the letter. You have a life, a future." "This is my future, Kalen," Finn interrupted, his eyes never leaving the moving patterns of the monolith. The symbols seemed to respond to his attention, swirling faster where he looked, like a liquid tapestry of impossible geometry. "It's shown me things, Kalen, things beyond what humans were meant to see, beyond what we could even dream." His eyes had transformed. The pupils had expanded until only a thin, iridescent ring of blue remained. They reflected the same serene certainty I'd seen on the peaceful corpses throughout the facility. "Colonel," I shouted desperately, turning to Rostova. "Help me get him out of here." Rostova didn't move, her face a mask of stone. "It's too late, Sergeant Vance, we're losing him." I turned back to Finn, who had taken another step toward the monolith, drawn by an irresistible force. "Please, Finn," I begged, my voice cracking. "That's not you talking. It's altering your brain just like the researchers." For a brief moment, Finn's eyes met mine. I saw a flicker of recognition, a spark of the friend I'd known for years, a flicker of true despair that quickly vanished. "I'm sorry, Kalen," he said, his voice momentarily his own again, a note of profound sadness in it. "But this is bigger than us." Then, before I could reach him, he pressed his palm flat against the black surface of the monolith. The material moved like water, covering his hand instantly. Finn didn't flinch, didn't struggle. His expression remained peaceful, calm, and almost joyful. The darkness traveled up his arm like a consuming tide. "Finn," I lunged forward again, but Rostova appeared behind me, gripping my shoulders with extreme, unbreakable firmness. "It's too late," she growled in my ear, her voice rough, urgent. "You'll be taken too. Get back." The monolith pulled Finn deeper, the blackness flowing around his torso now, consuming him. As it reached his chest, His body began to dissolve into tiny particles of light, shimmering motes that swirled into the dark surface. His body breaking down and being absorbed into the swirling, impossible surface of the monolith. "Run, Kalen," Finn told me, his voice calm, clear, even as his body disintegrated, his voice echoing in my mind. His eyes remained clear, lucid, and locked on mine. "Tell them what you saw. Tell them we're not alone. Tell Ilara I loved her." I struggled against Rostova's grip, but the colonel's hands held me with unbreakable force, dragging me backward. "He's already gone, Sergeant Vance. The explosives are set. We're leaving now." The blackness had reached Finn's neck, his head tilting back as if in release, a final, blissful surrender. I watched, helpless, as my best friend disappeared. His face was the last to dissolve, that peaceful, horrifying smile remaining until the moment he vanished completely, particles of what had been Finn Callahan mixing into the strange, swirling surface of the monolith. I stopped fighting. Rostova released me, and I stumbled backward, unable to look away from where Finn had stood seconds earlier. Nothing remained, not a trace of blood, not a scrap of uniform. He was completely gone, assimilated. "Move out now," Rostova ordered, shoving me toward the tunnel with a force that sent me sprawling. My training took over where conscious thought failed. I scrambled to my feet, my mind a blank, terrified canvas, and ran, following Gideon and Elias through the twisting passages. Behind us, Rostova and Thorn brought up the rear, their footsteps resounding over the constant, deep vibration that still shook through the cave system. The pressure in my skull began to ease, the further we got from the chamber, the horrifying mental static lessening. But another sensation replaced it, a distant roar building quickly, the sound of something powerful gathering behind us, a response. "It knows," Thorn shouted, his voice strained. "The monolith is responding. It's stabilizing." The cave floor trembled beneath our boots, the tremors growing violent. Crystalline formations shattered as we passed, raining sharp fragments around us, a shower of glittering death. The bioluminescent fungi flared brighter, then began to blacken and die, wilting and dissolving into putrid sludge as we ran past, consumed by the monolith's destructive reaction. Almost to the safe point, Elias called from ahead, the detonator clutched in his hand, his eyes wide with fear, but his grip firm. My lungs burned as we sprinted up the incline leading to the cave entrance. Daylight appeared ahead, a small circle of white brilliance that grew as we approached. The rumbling behind us intensified to a deafening crescendo, and I risked a glance back to see a wave of darkness, a consuming void, flowing up the tunnel rapidly, devouring the last vestiges of the alien light. "Now," Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the roar as we crossed an invisible threshold, bursting from the cave mouth into the blinding white of the Arctic. Elias pressed the detonator. Everything exploded with noise. The pressure wave caught me between my shoulder blades, a physical blow that lifted me off my feet and hurled me forward. I hit the ground hard, rolling in the fresh snow as a series of controlled detonations triggered in sequence, collapsing the cave system from the inside out. The ground heaved beneath us, shuddering violently. Snow and rock erupted from the cave entrance with a churning cloud of debris, spreading outward like a monstrous plume. I covered my head as fragments rained down, the sound of the collapse drowning out everything else for long and terrible moments, an ear-splitting symphony of destruction. Then, suddenly, silence. I raised my head to find myself lying in snow 30 yards from where the cave entrance had been. Nothing remained but a colossal pile of rubble and a vast cloud of dust settling slowly in the Arctic air like a shroud. The others were scattered around me. Gideon was helping Elias to his feet, both of them coughing. Thorn clutched his case of equipment, his face pale but his eyes alight with a strange, unholy triumph. Rostova was already standing, examining the collapse coldly, her posture rigid, her gaze unwavering. The silence in my mind was absolute. The whispers, the pressure, the terrifying, beautiful call of the monolith, all gone, buried beneath tons of rock and ice. I staggered to my feet, taking 3 steps before my legs gave out. I fell to my knees in the snow, the blinding daylight painful after the blue-green glow of the caves. My breath came in ragged gasps that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Finn was gone, and the silence in my mind was more overwhelming, more chilling than any noise could be. I knelt there while the others regrouped around me, their voices quiet and far away to my ears, like echoes from a distant room. The vast Arctic landscape stretched before us, pristine white and uncaring about what had just happened beneath its surface. The sun glinted off unbroken snow, a cruel, mocking gleam after the horror we'd witnessed. Ilia's hand came to rest on my shoulder, but I couldn't look up. I could only stare at the untouched snow before me, thinking of all the things Finn would never see again. His sister's face, his home, the future he'd planned so carefully. And beneath the grief, a question tormented me. Was he truly gone, or was he something else now, trapped in that alien darkness, conscious and aware as it broke him apart completely? I didn't know which possibility was worse. The sterile white walls of Dr. Sharma's office at Walter Reed made my skin itch. 2 months had passed since Alaska, but the memories remained as clear and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. I still woke up most nights seeing Finn's face as the black surface consumed him. That peaceful, horrifying smile that wasn't really his. I still heard the whispers when the world got too quiet, a phantom hum just at the edge of my hearing, an insidious presence that seemed to linger, to pulse. "How are the nightmares this week, James?" Dr. Sharma asked in her usual calm, professional voice. I shifted in the leather chair that never seemed to get more comfortable, no matter how many sessions I sat through. "Same as last week, doctor, and the week before that, and the week before that." She made a note in her leather-bound notebook. I'd gotten used to her routine over our mandated sessions. The careful notes, the measured pauses, the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking, a calculating assessment in her eyes. "You understand that repeated trauma exposure without resolution often leads to chronic PTSD, James," she said, her voice soft, but with an underlying firmness. "Your symptoms aren't improving under conventional therapy." "Maybe because what happened wasn't conventional, doctor," I shot back, the bitterness a familiar taste. Dr. Sharma set down her pen, her gaze unwavering. "The official report classified the incident as an accident at a climate research station. That's what the families were told. That's what the public knows." I almost laughed, a dry, humorless sound. The government had hidden the truth completely. Finn, Zara, Gideon, all listed as casualties of hostile action. The cave collapse attributed to explosives planted by unspecified extremists. The monolith, the signal, the crystalline growths, all redacted from existence. "And we both know that's a lie, doctor," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "James," she warned me gently, her eyes narrowing fractionally, "we've discussed this. Your experiences were traumatic, and your mind is struggling to process them in a rational framework." The same conversation we'd had a dozen times before. I looked out the window at the blue sky, wondering if Finn was somewhere out there now, transformed into something we couldn't understand, part of a vast, silent network. "How's Elias doing?" I asked, changing the subject. Dr. Sharma allowed the pivot, her expression unreadable. "He's adapted well. The intelligence analyst position suits his skills. His last evaluation showed no lingering trauma symptoms. He's happy, James, sleeping through the night. Building a life, because you erased them," I finished for her. "You helped him process his experiences in a way his mind could accept." She leaned forward slightly, her voice almost a whisper. "He's happy, James. Elias is a success story. I'd seen Elias 3 weeks ago, met him for a beer at a bar near Langley, ostensibly to catch up. He'd looked good, clear-eyed, relaxed, at ease. When I'd cautiously mentioned Alaska, he'd nodded, his eyes bright with conviction, and told me about the ambush outside the research station. Terrorists with heavy weapons. Finn caught in the crossfire. A cave-in during our escape. All of it false, planted memories that had overwritten the horror of what truly happened. He believed every word. "That's not Elias," I said, my voice tight. "He's been changed. He's been remade." Dr. Sharma sighed, a faint sound, and opened a drawer in her desk. She removed a folder and placed it before me. "The memory suppression therapy is non-invasive," she explained, sliding a prescription across the desk. "You'll still remember Alaska, but the traumatic elements will be softened. You can have a normal life again, a full life." I stared at the prescription without touching it. The medication had a long chemical name I couldn't pronounce, followed by dosage instructions, twice daily for 6 weeks, accompanied by guided therapy sessions. "And if I refuse?" I asked, my gaze fixed on her. "Then the nightmares will likely continue. Your official diagnosis remains PTSD, but we both know it's more complicated than that." She folded her hands on the desk, her eyes fixed on mine. "James, you've been through something terrible. You deserve peace, peace." As if forgetting was the same as healing, my mind drifted to Alara Callahan's face when I delivered Finn's letter 3 weeks after we returned. I'd found her in Minneapolis. I remembered the way her hands had trembled as she opened the envelope. How her bright blue eyes had filled with tears as she read his final words, words of love and regret, of a life he'd hoped to live. I'd held her as she wept for a brother whose body would never be recovered. I couldn't tell her the truth, that her brother hadn't died from a terrorist's bullet, but had been taken by something ancient, something beyond our comprehension. That he'd walked willingly into that darkness with a smile on his face, that sometimes, in my nightmares, I still heard his voice calling to me from within the void. "I saw Elias last month," I said instead of answering Dr. Sharma's implied question. "He told me about the ambush, about how Finn died heroically saving others." "That's what happened, James," Dr. Sharma said carefully, her voice neutral. "Is it?" I pressed, my voice rising, "because I remember something different. I remember a black monolith that shouldn't exist. I remember crystal formations growing in people's brains. I remember Finn being absorbed into something that rewrote reality around it. Which version is true, Doctor? The one the government tells the public, or the one you try to make us forget?" "The version that lets you live with yourself is the true one," she replied, her eyes unwavering. "Pretty philosophical for a military psychiatrist," I scoffed, but she ignored my provocation. "This will be our final session, James. The mandatory evaluation period has concluded. What happens next is your choice." I picked up the prescription, feeling its weight, such a small thing to reshape a man's mind, to rewrite his history. I thought about Elias and his clean conscience, his manufactured peace. I thought about sleeping through the night without seeing Finn disappear into that impossible darkness. I thought about the questions that haunted me. Was Finn truly gone, or was he part of something larger now, a collective consciousness? Had the monolith been destroyed or merely buried, waiting for another unsuspecting team? Would others find it someday, driven by the same thirst for knowledge, the same fatal curiosity? "I need my memories," I finally said, pushing away the prescription. "Without them, I'm not me anymore. I'm just a shell, Doctor." Sharma studied me, her professional expression changing just enough to reveal something that might have been respect. "I expected you'd say that." She closed the folder on her desk. "You understand what you're choosing, James. The nightmares will likely continue. The memories won't fade as they naturally would. You will carry this burden." "Some things shouldn't be forgotten," I replied, my voice firm, resolute. "Someone needs to remember what happened. Someone needs to know what's out there, even at the cost of my peace. Especially then." She nodded slowly. "Very well, I'll note your refusal of treatment in your file." She hesitated, then added, her voice low, "For what it's worth, James, I think you're making the right choice. Not the easy one, but the right one." I stood, realizing this was goodbye. After 2 months of weekly sessions, this sterile room had become something I'd gotten used to, a strange anchor in a world turned upside down. "Will they be watching me?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Probably," she said, "at least for a while, but your security clearance remains intact. Colonel Rostova saw to that." Rostova. The name still brought a surge of complicated emotions. After the cave collapsed, she'd been coldly efficient, getting us back to the research station, arranging extraction, and beginning the cover-up. She hadn't spoken to me directly since we'd landed back at Fort Bragg, communicating only through intermediaries. I wondered what she really knew about the monolith, what Thorne had told her after examining his data, after seeing Finn's assimilation. "What happened to Dr. Thorne?" I asked, realizing I'd never thought to ask before. "Reassigned," she said simply. "That's all I know." I nodded, unsurprised. People like Thorne vanished into government secrets, returning years later with new identities and classified projects. "Take care of yourself, James," Dr. Sharma said, extending her hand. "My door remains open if you need it." I shook her hand. "Goodbye, Doctor." As I walked through the corridors of Walter Reed for the last time, I felt strangely lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a quiet, determined strength. Even though I'd chosen the harder path, the memories would remain raw and painful. But they were mine. Finn's story would continue in me, unaltered by chemicals and careful therapy, unaltered by lies. Outside, spring had arrived in D.C., cherry blossoms lining the streets in delicate pink, a stark contrast to the desolate white of the Arctic. I paused on the steps, letting the sunlight warm my face, a small comfort. In my pocket, Finn's dog tags clinked softly against my own, a metallic whisper against the cold steel. Colonel Rostova had retrieved them from his quarters at Fort Bragg and wordlessly handed them to me before going back to her office, leaving me with this final, tangible piece of him. I had another appointment to keep. Ilara had invited me for dinner, a small gesture of thanks for delivering Finn's letter, a tentative step toward rebuilding a semblance of normalcy. We'd spoken several times since then, brief conversations that carefully avoided the true topic of her brother's absence. She didn't know the truth, and she never would. But I could still honor Finn's memory by being there for her, by remembering him as he truly was, not how he ended. And as I walked toward the metro station, blending into the ebb and flow of the city, I accepted my decision. The nightmares would continue, yes, but I would remember. I would preserve Finn's story, keep it alive, and stay alert for when something ancient might reach out from the stars again or from beneath the ice. Some difficult things couldn't be forgotten. They could only be faced with dignity, with courage. And as the city moved around me, full of people who would never know how close humanity had come to encountering something we couldn't understand, something that wanted to consume and transform us, I moved forward into whatever future awaited. My scar throbbed, a silent pulse, a secret echo in my mind. What part of the story gave you the chills? Tell me in the comments below.